Hey, hello, hi, welcome or welcome back. My name is Laura Black, and this is Blacklight Astrology. I just got in the mood to hop on here today and talk a little bit about the Mercury retrograde that we are in the middle of. I spoke a little bit about this during my video on the new moon in Leo, which we just had, and mentioned that it's, during this Mercury retrograde, but I wanted to bring some dates and some things to look for during this Mercury retrograde as a separate video. So this is being recorded on July 28th, which is a Monday here in the Pacific Northwest. Adjust that for your time and location on the planet. I'm looking at the sun at 6 degrees of Leo today, with Mercury at 11 degrees of Leo. And you can see that the number under Mercury is in red, and this is AstroGold, this software that I use. That is their way of indicating that it is currently in retrograde. From the Earth's perspective, it looks like Mercury is going backward. So we are a few days into this, or several days into this retrograde. What has it been, like 10 days now? I think it went retrograde back on the 17th or the 18th of July, depending on where you were on the planet. And it will continue to be retrograde until August 11th. So right out the gate, we know from the beginning of the retrograde, the 17th/18th, it was like late in the evening on the 17th, to August 11th, we are in the Mercury retrograde phase. It always lasts a few weeks, and it happens three, sometimes four times a year. You all remember 2020, right? We had four Mercury retrograde sets that year. Super fun. So Mercury retrograde, any retrograde of any planet by transit, meaning what's happening in the sky now, is a period of time where we go back and we're reflecting on something or we're revisiting, we're reviewing. Anything with the prefix re to it is what's happening during a retrograde. The planet Mercury rules all things communication systems. It rules cognitive function, thinking, writing, reading, anything like that. It also rules the systems through which we communicate, some technological. It does have an association with phones, computers, definitely cars. This is about getting things around in your local neighborhood or your immediate surroundings by your house. So this is like driving around your town. This is short-term planning, scheduling and booking in the near future. This is sales and kind of negotiations. Mercury is all about the sharing of ideas and perspectives. So under a retrograde, we're going back and we're reflecting on projects that are incomplete that need to be revisited and redone. Mercury is the ruler of Gemini, which is the communication piece. It's also the ruler of Virgo, which is that projects piece. Virgo is an earth sign that takes the information that is very mercurial, the lessons, the information, the ideas, and puts them into physical practice and gets shit done. So under Mercury retrograde, we might go back and tie up loose ends. We might go back and revisit the project that we thought was done but wasn't quite. Now, there's always a special moment amidst the Mercury retrograde where we get a little bit of clarity, where we really get kind of the information that knocks us upside the head that we had been missing, the missing piece, the peak of the conversation that we've been needing to go back and have. And that usually happens when we have this moment called Mercury cazimi. Mercury cazimi, if you're unfamiliar, any cazimi is a moment when a planet lines up within the heart of the sun, is how we say it. Cazimi is a word that means in the heart of. So it has to be aligned with the sun to the exact degree, but it has to be within 17, some people say 16 minutes. So here we have the degrees. The sun is at 6 and Mercury is at 11. But down here you can see those smaller numbers, if you've ever wondered, those are the minutes of the degrees. There are 60 minutes per degree. And two planets, or a planet has to be within 17 minutes of the sun in order for us to call it a cazimi, where it is in the heart of the sun. Now, the sun is this super consciousness. It is the life-giving force of energy in our solar system. This is the power source. It shines, it illuminates, it energizes. And when a planet lines up with that potent kind of spotlight energy, it lights it up and it shines a particular lesson. I say lesson with a question mark because it's like, well, it's Mercury. So, of course, there's a message. He's the messenger. There's a lesson because he's a teacher. But any planet, it will shine a potency of that planet's energy down onto the Earth. So under a Mercury cazimi, it's this moment where during the retrograde, Mercury will, it doesn't always happen, by the way, every Mercury retrograde. Mercury, this planet, is always, near the sun. It's always within 30 degrees. It's always within the sign before or the sign after. And so it's only that we have a Mercury cazimi, the alignment of the two, the sun and Mercury, when Mercury has passed the sun in its synodic cycle by the time we get to the retrograde. So here Mercury was ahead of the sun, but now it's going backward from our perspective and passing over the sun. This cazimi moment, this magical moment of kind of a spotlight shining through the energy of Mercury will be happening on here in the Pacific Northwest. It's Thursday, the 31st of July. Again, if you're on some other part of the planet, do adjust that time for your location. But this Thursday, we'll be having Mercury cazimi. I love paying attention to Mercury cazimis. They're often, one of the first transits that get people kind of hooked into astrology. First, you start hearing about Mercury retrograde, because it happens so frequently and because it affects so many of the nitty-gritty details of life, all things Gemini and Virgo, all the communications and all the systems flowing. It just kind of gets a little glitchy. And so anybody who's tuned into the astrology is often like, oh, it's Mercury retrograde. And you start hearing about that. But then when you start to realize that that's really happening or you're really experiencing the retrograde in general, then you might get a little more tuned in and start to notice that cazimi moment. This is often the point in the retrograde where the conundrum, the conflict, the question, the thing that's being reviewed becomes very clear. And there is the peak of the conversation or the realization of what needs to be said or what missing piece, needs to be put in place so that this thing can really be complete, or the signing of the contract is done, the contract that we're going back to review, the re-signing, let's say. You'll hear a lot of astrologers say, don't sign contracts during Mercury retrograde. Look, I'm not one of those. Okay, I admit I used to be. I used to be a very doom and gloom astrologer. But we have to live our lives. And the retrograde period is not something to be afraid of or to plan your life around. Although I do often joke that being so Gemini, someday I would like to get to the point where I don't have to work during Mercury retrograde because my readings are just not as good. I'm trying to find the word and I can't, and I'm late and I mess up. But I become a better astrologer. I become a better teacher when I move through the retrograde, and I give myself permission to do what the retrograde is about. Slow down, go back, rethink, double check, think twice before you say the thing. And when you don't, when you inevitably when you inevitably rush forward or, don't double check the details or expect things to flow as effortlessly as they might normally, and life and you get hung up on something or there's an issue or you lock your keys in the car or whatever it is, well, then that teaches you. And we can have a little chuckle about it. And, that's what the astrology is for, is to recognize that, oh, yep, okay, our timing is perfect. This and I'm learning, we tap into a little bit of acceptance and awareness, and then we grow. We're not here going, oh, it's Mercury retrograde and it's ruining everything. Like, to fear or to loathe the cycle is completely futile. Why? Why? It's here to give us an opportunity. Mercury retrograde, an opportunity to slow down and reflect and try and say that again in a better way. Check in with the stories you're telling yourself, etc. Now, that's a universal approach to use of Mercury retrograde. If you want to get more detailed than that, you would go to the Leo portion of your chart. So you pull up your chart, whatever house system you use, go find where the sign of Leo is. There's that symbol, should be red if you're working in color. And you want to look for the degrees that we're working with in this retrograde. It's 15 degrees, or is it 14 or 16? 15-ish degrees of Leo, all the way back to 4 degrees of Leo, because that is the range through which Mercury will be retrograding. You find that space in your chart. Figure out what house it's in. For example, the chart I have here, this is just where the planets are right now as I'm recording this. And so this is based in Eugene, Oregon, where I'm located at, in 3:40 in the afternoon. And it happens to be Scorpio on the horizon line right now. So this chart is based on a Scorpio rising. So for me, this is happening in the ninth house. If I were to cast it over my own personal birth chart, it's happening over my 10th house. Hi, this is me trying to build my legacy because Mercury is retrograding. Laura, get out there and make your videos and have a public image. It's actually in the whole sign house system on my 11th house of social media. So, hi, YouTube. This is me coming back to re-kickstart my YouTube channel and make more content. Ha. So you find out what house this is happening in for you in your personal chart. You notice if there are any planets in that range of Leo, 15-ish degrees to 4 degrees, reading backward, but in that range of Leo, but also in the other fixed signs. So if you have planets in that same range, 4 to 15 degrees of Scorpio or Taurus or even Aquarius, then you are feeling this retrograde louder than most people. So check your chart and see what's happening there. And then you start to fine tune it. What do those other planets mean? And la da 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 da. And if that's overwhelming, because I know this is a big, complex combination lock, well, that's what your friendly neighborhood astrologers are here for. So, check out my website. You can book with me, even a midi reading for a little check-in on something like Mercury retrograde. Now, on Thursday the 31st, we have this actual Mercury cazimi. And here it is. You can see where Mercury on Thursday, I have it set to Thursday afternoon here. Mercury is at 9 degrees and 2 minutes, retrograde in Leo. And the sun will be at 8 degrees and 58 minutes. There they are coming tight together. And like an hour later, they're smack on top of each other. Boom. Oops. There we go. Oh, there it is. The exact, perfect to the minute Mercury cazimi. That'll be happening here in the Pacific Northwest at like 4:40 p.m. on Thursday. Oh, I'll be teaching yoga. Fun. So check that out in your chart. See if there's anything you can glean from the area, the house it's in, and see what that house means. Plenty of graphs online to look that up. And see what other planets are being played with there. Mercury cazimi is, I guess it's not always sweet, depending on what it's doing in your chart, but I really enjoy it because the feeling can be so clear, even if you don't catch it while it's happening. Sometimes you pass over and experience a transit, and then days later, weeks, months, years later, you look back and be like, oh, that was the thing. And so even if you don't notice anything come through on Thursday, or if there's no conversation or information or message that comes through, just notice your own thoughts. What's on your mind? What are you ruminating about? What are you reflecting on? What comes up in your free writing or your journaling or whatever? What are you noticing? What grabs your attention that day? What pops up in your social media feed? It's a little bit freaky when you start noticing that, like, is the algorithm paying attention to my astrology because they're sending me this message or this ad on this day of Mercury cazimi? Sometimes it aligns and it's pretty freaky. So pay attention on Thursday. See what comes through. And if you don't notice anything, track it for the next several days. Track it for the rest of Mercury retrograde. And you might look back to the 31st of July somewhere down the road and realize, oh, that was that thing. Okay. So Mercury retrograde in Leo continues on until August 11th. And then the other date I want to give you is the next time we have a Mercury cazimi after this retrograde ends. And there's sometimes a tie-in, not always, but in this case, there's an interesting follow-through. If I take it forward to the 11th of July, here's Mercury back at 4 degrees where it first, where it's going to pause and go direct. And here's the sun at 19 Leo, so it's still in Leo season. We take it forward to the 13th of September. So it's a good month and 2 days after. And then all of a sudden we have this Mercury cazimi with the sun in Virgo, Mercury in Virgo, which is Mercury's favorite sign, by the way. That's its exaltation, as we say in astrology. That is where Mercury excels. And this is a big deal because it's happening smack in the middle of eclipse season. If you're new to eclipses, I will be making content on the eclipses coming up soon, so keep your eyes open for that. But you can see that the sun is with this U-shaped character over here. That is the south node. And the sun on the south node, as the moon approaches it, ooh, and the moon's squaring the nodes on that day of Mercury Cazimi. Interesting. This is huge. There's some kind of pattern of purification or an over-identification with purification processes, or with perfection, or with, high tendencies of control, or constantly criticizing or even shaming to shape things the way you want them to be, whether you're doing that externally or it's happening from within. Those kinds of patterns, this shadowy side of Virgo, is going to be coming up for some very serious examination at that time. And on September 13th, right smack in the middle of this eclipse season, we're going to be getting a very clear, like a screenshot moment of that pattern somehow and what needs to be diminished. And we might have a conversation about it. This message could come from within or from somebody else. Again, it will really depend on where this Virgo energy falls in your personal birth chart, how that relates to you. But definitely a date to look for. It is well over, it's just over a month after this Mercury retrograde ends. But this Mercury retrograde is leading us into eclipse season. And this next Mercury Cazimi following this retrograde happens smack in eclipse season on the South Node. Pretty significant. So there's that. Now back to this Mercury retrograde and what it's doing today. Because when that Cazimi, here's how they tie in. When that Mercury Cazimi happens on September 13th in Virgo, at that time, Mercury and the sun will be at 21 degrees of Virgo. And look where the south node is right now. Do I have the true nodes up right now? Let me check a calculation here real quick. Yeah, I have the mean nodes up. True nodes are at 19 right now. Okay, just wanted to double check. If you don't, if you know, you know. There's true means or true nodes and mean nodes. Oh my gosh, Mercury retrograde. Fumbling for my words every time. So I just wanted to check which calculation I have up. I have the mean nodes going on right now. The South Node is currently at 20 degrees Virgo, and that is just shy. That's just a little off, like less than a degree off of where the next Mercury Cazimi will be on September 13th, smack in the middle of eclipse season on the South Node, which the nodes are where the eclipses happen. So this is being highlighted by the approaching new moon solar eclipse on the South Node that'll be happening, I think, on the 22nd of September. I could be off on that. It could be the 24th. So, good dates to note. Again, right now we are mid Mercury retrograde in Leo. I have more to say on that in a second. On the 31st of July, which will be this Thursday here in the Northwest, it'll be Mercury Cazimi. So keep your ears open or notice your thoughts. And then on August 11th, Mercury goes direct again, and we have another 10 or so days of the post-shadow period, kind of the integration, where we're tying up the loose ends and really like integrating what we learned from the retrograde. And then we ease into ease into eclipse season, and on September 13th, we get this Mercury Cazimi exalted in Virgo, but on the South Node, so there's some karmic patterns coming up to be purified, released. Purified is not quite the right word, but definitely released or diminished at the South Node. And it's happening, that Cazimi will be happening right where today's South Node is sitting. So this time that we're in this Mercury retrograde, is going to tie in karmically with the next Mercury Cazimi. Not the one on Thursday of July, but the one on the 13th of September. I'll talk about this again during the eclipse videos. I'll bring it back up, but I just wanted to throw that out there now so you can pay attention to what's brewing, what's emerging, especially if you're tapped in to the Virgo portion of your chart. If you understand what's going on where the moon happens to be right now as of this recording, and Mars and the South Node are hanging out in the last decan of Virgo, that is, there's something definitely brewing there that we're going to reflect back to and have some more information and understanding about September 13th. Okay, Lastly, on this Mercury retrograde, what are we feeling? It's in the sign of Leo, which rules the heart. It is squaring mean Lilith. Um, Lilith and Scorpio, the year of the snake, eh? I love Lilith and Scorpio. So intense, so empowering. But it really is a demand to reclaim our power through no bullshit authenticity, absolute, pure honesty and vulnerability. This is bringing up some shadows in conversation. This is, oh, I heard one astrologer say it's addressing a hole in the heart, and I really loved that. That really like landed with me. Addressing a hole in the heart. Mercury in Leo, retrograde, squaring Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio. This Mercury retrograde is asking us to muster courage. This is reflecting back on messages I had in the new moon in Leo video. It's really asking us to bring out our courage to express ourselves fully and to speak from the heart, but to really check the shadows of Leo, to speak from the heart without getting, overly dramatic or burning out the others, taking up all the space, without being, overpowering like the sun can on a way too hot day, and also without diminishing what our heart really desires, without shutting that down for the sake of acceptance, approval, validation, or whatever, to not to be too much. But to figure out how can I speak authentically and honestly and openly from my heart, especially if my heart is hurting, without, being the lion that bites or being too sheepish. There's a lot about self and self-confidence because we've got Saturn in Aries, Neptune in Aries. We're all going through this journey of figuring out how to build toward the dream that we have of the new self. Wherever the Aries part of your chart falls, is how you're going about that. But we're all being asked to reclaim ourselves and rebuild ourselves and find deep connection to the mystery of life, source, God, divinity. I don't know, the Tao, you call it what you want to call it, but through the self and not through giving our power to some external source, whatever that person or thing or philosophy or way or whatever it may be. That you can have all those things out there, but none of that is actually going to be your real connection to source. It happens in here through the self. We're all being called on that journey with Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, and that is trining this Mercury retrograde. It will be trining the Cazimi, technically. If you stretch the orb, it's the sun. I can do a 10-degree orb on the sun. So at 8 degrees, 9 degrees of Leo, sure. That's trining loosely your Neptune, Saturn conjunction in Aries. Why not? So this moment is asking us to muster the courage to really share and shine from the inner child, bring it out and play, or to share courageously what's on our minds and what's on our hearts. We've been practicing, we've been learning through conflict these last couple of years, through relationship, how to assert ourselves. Not too much self, not being a doormat or being passive or, morphing ourselves for the sake of the other, but finding strong self and radiating confidently out from there with clear boundaries and clear fearlessness is the word coming to mind, but just assertion, clear, assertive, direct energy to have a healthy me and we relationship. We've all been practicing that forever with the North Node in Aries, and hell, before that, the North Node in Taurus. There's been a lot of Venusian energy, South Node in Libra. We've all been working on relationship for a while, and now it's like, okay, apply what you've learned. Stand up, be who you are, let go of the contracts that are not working and aligned with you. Lean into the ones where you can show up as self, they can show up as themselves, and you can, hold your own and find harmonic. Okay, Mercury. Harmonious dynamics or dynamic harmony, which is not always good, right? It ebbs and flows. But to keep a more balanced connection through strong sense of self and autonomy. I love thinking about it this way because I do parts work in therapy. Anybody else out there do parts work? Internal family systems. If you don't know about it, go check it out. I love it. What's his name? Schwartz, the author of No Bad Parts. So good. It starts with self. I love that idea mirrored and reflected in the astrology. Aries, the first sign of the zodiac. It all starts with self. I think many of us who are raised in very religious kind of environments, depending, I can't speak for all religious upbringings out there, but many of us are taught that to focus on the self or to put yourself first, that's selfish, and that that's a bad thing, point blank, that there's no redeeming quality to this having a strong self, but that we have to serve or be somehow subdued or less than, especially as women. Um, that you can't be to be too much full of self. You're full of yourself. There's all these negative connotations to being self-strong or self-ish or self-first. But if we don't have that strong connection to self, then all these other parts are constantly, breaking off and doing all kinds of strange things to compensate and cope. So I'm actually really enjoying Saturn in Aries so far. Hard as it is, exhausting as it is, I've never felt so old or so tired in my life. Jeez. It's hard. Saturn in Aries is hard, limiting the chi, limiting the life force, the I am, the motivation. It's just kind of feels like a long Mars retrograde extension so far to me. How about you guys? Um, but this Mercury retrograde is saying, okay, we know who we're trying to become. We know where we're trying to go with this. We have to go back and rethink and bring out the inner child universally, in kind of a bigger picture sense of things around the world scene. I see this showing up in how we're reflecting on children in the world. We're reflecting on even here in the United States. Okay, the Epstein files. How minors were exposed to harm. We're reflecting on kids on the internet. Again, I mentioned this in the New Moon in Leo video. Um, should we put children online? Should we expose them to the internet? What parts and how do we control that? Are parental controls effective and when? And what or should we allow anybody to share pictures or videos of children? Should child stars be a thing? All of this is coming up more and more lately, but thinking about what children really need in the world and how we can support them so that they can grow into a strong self, free of all these weird conditions and manipulations or pressures of being the breadwinner and then not having access to the money or being exposed to whom and whatever online, Lots to think about in terms of children in the world. A lot of people thinking about whether or not they want to have children with the birth rates dropping, or that's what you hear from time to time, yeah. Um, Things of that nature coming up in this Mercury retrograde in Leo. Okay, that's all I have for you today. So keep those dates in mind. July 31st, the Cazimi. August 11th, it moves direct just after midnight, first thing in the morning here in the Pacific Northwest. And then September 13th is our next kind of future tripping into September 13th, which is our next Mercury Cazimi, which is in the middle of that eclipse season. All right. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching my channel. I really appreciate you being here. I'm loving seeing the comments and the involvement. It means so much to me. I've been really, really scared to do this and to put myself out there online. I have a lot of shame around being an astrologer, which is so weird. I've been doing this professionally for years now, several years, and yet I'm still working through a lot of the religious shame that I had being raised and being super interested in astrology since I was like 15, and the way my dad shamed me around it, my culture and community shamed me out of it. And so it was this secret obsession. And for many, many years of my adult life in my own personal study, anytime I'd talk about it, people would make fun of me. I've lost boyfriends over it. I've lost friends over it. I've had people think I was really dumb. And because of my own, set of traumas, I've been really focused on what other people think of me. That's a part of my cult trauma that I'm working through, of like just letting that go. But the people pleaser in me and the approval seeker in me, as trained by the cult that I was raised in, really cared for so long that people thought astrology was dumb and didn't matter how much validity I saw in it or power or like what an amazing tool I found it to be. I still cared too much about what other people thought. So this is me and Mercury Cazimi happening on my 10th slash 11th houses, depending on which house system you use, coming out to say, here are some of my thoughts on the astrology. And it feels good. It feels like I'm finally able to talk about it without, this is probably the first video I've made where I wasn't just constantly in my mind being like, oh, you sound dumb and who cares? And they already know that, or nobody is interested in this. Like just a lot of negative self-talk and a lot of shame happening in my mind. So seems like I'm moving through it. Seems like Mars over the South Node in Virgo was really helping me diminish some of that inner critic that's involved in the actions that I take. Very nice. Astrology for liberation from shame. Hey, that's a video that I'm going to make in the next week or two. So look for that one. I've got a lot to say about astrology as an amazing tool for liberation from shame. And that is something we are all working on this whole next year with the South Node in Virgo, looking at shame and where it holds us and binds us and how to move out of it. Um, Thank you so much for being a part of this. If you would like to book a private session with me, you can visit my website, black-light-astrology.com. I do a lot of astrology over on Instagram, black_light_astrology. Thanks for being here. I appreciate all of you, and I will see you again soon in the stars. Bye.